Welcome to Crownsmen Energy. I'm your host, Jared Downey. With me is Gowdy Molina. Good morning, Gowdy.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I always say good morning, or I go to, and I wonder, does anybody actually listen in the morning?
I don't know. I'm actually curious. Maybe, let us know. Do you actually listen in the morning? Should we just not say good morning?
It just grinds everybody's gears in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking about making buildings smarter today.
Okay.
And you know what? I'm actually happy that we cover these things that it's like, like I've looked at these buildings and gone, how these older buildings, especially, how I was like, they were just putting in these electrical systems and power systems. And there must be so much energy lost. It's one of these things, but of course I don't have the background to go fix the problem. So we have someone on the show that can. We're going to have Mark Chung. He's the CEO of Verdigris Technologies. Very exciting to see what they're doing on the show. Before we do that, Gowdy, we got to give a shout out to sponsors that just keep on coming and keep sticking with the show. So
yeah,
shout out to them.
All right. Well, first up, we've got Savannah Equipment. Are you working on pipelines, oil and gas projects, renewable energy, or LNG and need to save some cash? Well, Savannah Equipment has industrial pumps, electrical equipment from motors to transformers, and even surplus pipe and much, much more available now. You can visit them at savannahequipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day. We also have SolarSet. Introducing the SolarSet Fold, the new foldable frame solar system brings power to your residential and commercial property and can be shipped worldwide. Like all SolarSet products, the SolarSet Fold comes turnkey, pre-assembled, and is easily transported and installed. Learn more about the SolarSet Fold and their full line of amazing solar systems at solarset.com. And of course, last but not least, we've got PowerZone Equipment. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas, pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. Visit them at powerzone.com. Alrighty.
Okay. No SolarSet ad today, hey?
I did. I just did the
SolarSet. Sorry. Wow. I was reading through the notes and I tuned out I heard Savannah, PowerZone, and then I didn't hear the middle part.
Yeah.
At least I'm focused on the guest. At least I'm focused on the guest. Hello. Wow, Mark, we're off to a good start. You can see why I did not develop the technology you did. Welcome to the show. Good to have you on.
Thanks, Jared. Welcome. I'm glad to be on.
Okay. I guess I'd want to start with, the technology you developed is obviously a huge savings for buildings, but I kind of want to take it back before we get into it, is that sort of the legacy systems that are in place now in these, commercial, large residential buildings, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can tell you that, buildings is a very, very old technology. People have been building buildings since the people moved out of caves. And along that way, these buildings last a very long time. The legacy systems that are out there predate the internet, predate computation, predate computing. So, a lot of times it's very manual, it's very labor intensive. Managing a very big building, this just takes a lot of work. And so it's not going to be the most efficient systems out there today.
Yeah, I'm going to ask some very simple questions. And I don't even think this is exactly your area, but I'm just curious. When you go up like an escalator and that it shuts off when nobody's on it, how much energy does that actually save? A lot of energy. I sometimes wonder, I'm like, it's got to kick on to come going. I wonder how much it actually makes a difference. Like, have you looked at that type of stuff, those sort of energy saving strategies that buildings have sort of tried to put in small ways?
Yeah. Yeah. Surprisingly, things like escalators or people movement, conveyance, those things actually do take quite a bit of energy because they're just running continuously. So if you think about not just kind of running an escalator, in a mall, they used to run just overnight all the time. And they burn, they're heavy, they move heavy. They're made out of steel. They do a lot of stuff. So we do see that there's a lot of low-hanging basic things that people can be doing to save energy. And so this has been a best practices industry for a long period of time where they're like, hey, we figured out a way to save some energy. okay, everyone go do it. Switch out your LEDs, put these like start stop detectors on your escalators, things like that.
And yeah, exactly. And that's what I was wondering. Like sort of the old way of doing it you would have had to just be almost like the obvious things. Is that right? Those are the things you have to invest, because is it expensive, like to analyze a building? I mean, 20 years ago to try to analyze your energy consumption, would have that been, lack of a better question, difficult?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, even today, I think, even though we have great technology, you go out there, a lion's share of the buildings today still kind of rely on a very heavy service industry where, if you want to figure out how much energy your building's consuming, you got to hire an auditor. They do a walkthrough, they put loggers in, they manually check on the big things. They have to run a regression for a period of time, then they have to analyze it. And you're talking about very expensive labor costs to just do a basic analysis. And you need experts to do this. So it's not something that an everyday, building operator or commercial industrial operator is going to have, money and resources to do.
And so where does Verdigris come in? What are you actually bringing into the market?
Well, I think we're bringing a technology refresh to capabilities in the market. I think, if you think about just on the consumer side, having things like an iPhone that has like supercomputing power in your hand, we're basically taking technology that's been accessible in the consumer space and just putting it in buildings. We've looked at this really trend around like falling cost of computation and sensors and connectivity, and with cellular everywhere, we can put a really low cost sensor inside a building, collect that information up in real time, and it doesn't cost a lot of money to do that. Putting it down and putting technology into the building today, it's actually quite easy.
What are you tracking? I mean, and I know like for you, you're in this business, so it's probably kind of obvious, but from my point of view, it's not. I just go into a building and lights come on and elevators are going and heats and air conditioning and all this sort of stuff. What are you tracking? Like where are you taking the data from? Where is your sensor located? What's the actual setup?
Yeah, so it turns out almost all of the electrical infrastructure inside your building, hierarchically, it looks like almost like a tree. So you think about like a big pipe of electricity coming into your building, and it goes into the first layer of breaker panel, which is like kind of your incoming feed. And then from there, it goes into big equipment and it goes into distribution feeds. So we put our sensors kind of at this like sweet spot where at each of those distribution panels, we will install the sensors, and then they collect everything downstream that fans off from that. So it's
segment of what's operating in the building then.
Correct.
So then it's multiple sensors. You're obviously not putting, now I say it seems more obvious. You're not putting one giant sensor on because you're actually having to find these different feeds then.
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, we have, we've designed a kind of from the ground up, we kind of rethought about what like sub-metering looks like. So we designed a kind of digital toolless sensor. It clips in really quickly. So if you think about where these panels sit, we just put one piece of equipment at each of these panels, but it may have like 42 sensors connected to it. And that gets us like a really light hardware footprint, very easy installation, but gets us data across like the entire facility.
It's, your company's won awards. You've got some good case studies and worked with some just absolutely major companies or the biggest companies in the world. But I kind of have to take it back. I mean, where did it start? Like, are you sitting at a coffee shop and someone just makes a suggestion and the notepads come out, or like, how does it, or was there market research? How did the idea for it get going?
Oh, it's a good story. So, prior to this company, my co-founders and I were working on a kind of deep packet inspection technology. So my background is classically semiconductor and semiconductor manufacturing, chip design, algorithmic design. And at a previous company that I was working at called NetLogic, we had been designing a type of novel packet inspection algorithm. And that algorithm, that technology had the ability to do all sorts of signal tracing and detection. And around the same time, I'd been a homeowner for about a year. And 1 month that I went on vacation and came back, I noticed that my bill had suddenly spiked from about $80 a month, which was already much higher than I was used to living in apartments for my whole life.
Yeah.
Just suddenly it hit like $600 a month, and that was like startling for me because I was like, well, like I'm trying to stretch. They always say homeowners, you need to stretch to kind of buy your first home. Well, I took a stretch, but the utility bill just was like putting me over the top.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So a month went by where I was just like thinking something happened. Someone must have snuck into my yard and plugged something in, or someone's stealing electricity, or the utility company must have made a mistake. So I called them and tried to ask, and kind of stumbled around. And after like a month or so, I got another utility bill, and it was kind of the same level. It was like, $500-$600.
Probably 600.
Yeah. $600 US. Yeah. It's a lot of money. So it was like per month. Yeah. And, it's like not a lot of people in my house, like 3 people. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. So, so then my co-founder, John, and I were kind of working on the weekend. And I was like, hey, this weekend, why don't we just come over to my house, and can we just like figure out what's going on in the house? And so we went over to Home Depot and bought a bunch of these little plug-in meters and put them around my house. And we got a little bit smart about it because, we're engineers from, Stanford and stuff. So we're like, hey, look.
There's a little bit of jealousy welling up inside me right now. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, oh man, I have no idea how to do that. That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So we put these little sensors around, and then we're like, okay, we're going to collect all this data. So we're going to put Wi-Fi on it, link it to my Wi-Fi network, run it into a spreadsheet, and then I'm going to calculate everything, and then just going to figure this out. So about a week goes by. We come back the next weekend. We kind of like check on all the data set, and there's, we do the math, and it doesn't add up. It's still like, super low. It should be like $60. It shouldn't be $600. So we were just thinking about this and thinking about, I was like, what could it possibly be? And then we were work on this packet inspection algorithm, and it suddenly clicked. I was like, you know what? What if we just got rid of all these like distribution of sensors and just took something directly from the power feed going into the building, and let me just sample that data set, because there's nothing else that can come in or out of the building except through that piece. So let's get it all the way out at that edge. And then we borrowed an oscilloscope from work, ran it over the weekend, and took this trend data and ran a generic algorithm on it. Like it was, kind of rudimentary stuff, but it was a startling discovery. It was like every single device in my house was generating a very unique signature, electrical footprint, almost like a fingerprint. And from that, running this generic algorithm, we could separate, label, and see all the different equipment in my house. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, there's this gigantic thing that's spiking up in the middle of the night, and it's running for 12 hours continuously and then shutting off. And it's not connected to anything else in the house. And so
I so badly want you to say there was a giant greenhouse the next house over from you.
That's what, I was like, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
And, miraculously, it turned out to be like my pool pump. So I went back and I was like, I checked, and the pool pump had turned black. It had been like, it had basically burned out, but it was still running, and it was just massively leaking electricity. So we swapped it out, and the next month my bill went back to like $60, and I was like, oh no, that was cool. That was a fun experiment. Let's back to work. So that was kind of like the start of the technology. And then back to your question about like, why did we start it? After that, our company got acquired by Broadcom in 2011. I started thinking a lot more about what is it that we're going to be doing with the rest of our lives. Like, now I have a young kid. John had a young kid. We were just thinking like, we should be thinking about the next generation. What can we be doing to be helpful for them? And I was reminded that we had this technology capability, and I watched this kind of Al Gore movie called Inconvenient Truth, and it's like it just startled me that all these things were happening, all this climate change was happening, all these things kind of like changing the environment, and it was all due to like just inefficiency. And surprisingly, so much of our energy footprint, electricity, it's just because it's been reliable and stable for so long, people don't even think about it.
Right.
And so it just has ballooned, and it's been such an inefficient use. So we just said, okay, well, we have this technology. It tells us where everything is being broken and inefficient. Why not just try and find people's problems and figure out how to solve them? And that kind of became the launch of the company.
It's really interesting, actually. Like that. Just quickly curious. Why the spike at night with the pump? Was it on a timer?
It was on a timer. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it kicks on at night and then runs all night, and it's supposed to automatically shut off when it gets to a certain point, right?
Yep.
So this continues on. Wow. And I want to ask another question that just something you said, you both had kids, and this is, I have this little personal fight against the general post, because I hate those things on social media. Those, as soon as someone says like, love yourself, these things that just going to grind me.
Pass this to 10 of your friends.
Yeah, exactly. Just grinds me. And one of the things is like, and I hear it in regular conversation, like, people like don't get married, kids and all that stuff. And consistently you see that, and you touched on something that I found interesting, is that once you had kids, you both you and your partner had kids, then you start to look at your future differently. And actually that in a way inspired the opportunity. And I think that's I know people say that, but I find usually it kind of gets breezed by in these interviews, and I've done it myself. But I think that's an important thing to touch on, is all of a sudden that new sort of focus and how much of a difference it makes.
Oh yeah. It's a huge difference. I mean, having children is for your audience, I don't know, it's life-changing. Like, I think as a young engineer growing up, kind of being like technical and going down a path, like, go study at Stanford, go get an engineering degree, go get a job, go work on this, get a job on, in Silicon Valley making, whatever. And you're on this little like trail where you're forced into a career path. And when I had kids, it would, I guess I'll just digress a little bit. Like when my wife and I got married, she said, I don't want to have kids. And I was like, well, I kind of want a family at some point. It would like kind of fits the model that, like, as a first generation immigrant or second generation immigrant, my parents were like, go get a good job, study good school, study engineering, get married, have kids. Mm-hmm. So like along that path, my wife, when I discussed it with her, she's like, I don't want to really have kids. Mm-hmm. And then about 4 years into our marriage, she sort of started to think about it. And when it happened, it was sort of like this kind of lucky, I will say like lucky accident. I don't know if that's, they have to put on this show because it's going to be recorded.
Your kid's going to be watching and it's going to be going, really?
Yeah. But because of that kind of happy accident, I went from thinking that like at the end of my life will be the end of my life. It would just be done. And having kids sort of changed this perception of like, my mortality isn't defined by the end of my life. Now it is going to continue. Like some part of me will continue. And it was like expansion of my perspective, and it awakened sort of like a motivation, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know. I wouldn't call it altruism, but like a thought of like something's going to go on beyond me that I care about. I want to contribute to. And I want to be able to help. And so, it was motivation changing for sure.
And you already had all those parts and pieces of that foundation that you needed with the education, the experiences. You had all that already there, and that sort of, from what it sounds, it sort of rounds you out as a person, and then gives you sort of that capability to then go into a business like this, which is changing a landscape. I mean, it's sort of fitting because it's changing the future of how a building. I mean, I guess jumping back into the business side is like what was happening with your pool pump. Can that be happening in a building? You'd have so many variables that could be happening at 10 different spots at the same time. So you could be fixing 2 problems. You still got 8 going. And I'm sure you've discovered that in some of your work.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was one of kind of the most surprising things in the early days of the company. So I was thinking, you have these giant companies out there that have been around for hundreds of years, and they've been, they're massively wealthy companies. They can be putting technology out there. All these commercial buildings can definitely afford it. So, I'm sure they have no problems. And, in the beginning, we were sort of like, well, let's look at homeowners, because I think that's an underserved market. I think that's where people are going to really care. And we're going to be finding problems like mine, where we just have like pool pumps all over the place, just doing stupid things. And, it had just turned out when we kind of started, like they just really didn't. I mean, homeowners, some of them cared, not a lot of them did, because utility bills like sort of something it's like on auto bill pay from your bank, and you don't even think about it. But when I talked to a lot of these, we ended up interacting with some guys at NASA and at the sustainability base, and we're talking about them, and they've been studying the commercial building space for a long period of time. And we actually established a research partnership with them, because once they kind of revealed to me the data set, it turns out the commercial building space is like there was just no technology in this space at all.
It's amazing. It seems crazy. Like,
it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so they actually provide. So you got that research from them then?
Yeah, initially, I mean, we started looking at their data sets. We started looking at a bunch of work that they were doing with Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories, and we even like went into their own building, and they were like, "Well, we don't have any like sensors of the sophistication that you guys can deliver. Why don't we just put your stuff in this NASA facility, and let's just see how we're doing and track?" And I'm like, "This is the leading." Building for the U.S. federal government. Is the number 1 highest performing building in the federal government, and they didn't have sensors. They didn't have electrical sensor. So it's like, how are you collecting the data to know that you're performing well? And they're like, who does that? Nobody does that. I was like, what? Like, this is crazy. And then we started talking to more and more companies, and some of our companies, like as you mentioned, like the largest companies in the world, and they're like, they want to be doing this, but they had no solutions in the market for that. So
yeah, I guess one of the things I was trying to figure out coming into this interview, I was like, why? Because you'd said like there wasn't, and I was trying to figure out why. But I guess when you're building, let's say you're an online retailer and you're taking over a warehouse. Most of the time, they're not even building their own warehouses. They're just taking on a legacy system, because their main priority is getting distribution out there. That's not going to be their focus, right? It's almost like it's just something that got missed.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the industry is built this way. There's lots of money going into construction. Mm-hmm. People build these buildings, and they say, "Oh, I'm going to build this like state of the art, super high performance building," and then turn it over to the operation team.
Yeah.
And a buyer buys it, an operator buys it. It's solely someone totally separate, and it's like your problem. And I don't have a warranty on the performance of this thing at all. So whatever you get is whatever you get. And then they didn't leave any systems or tools or anything to like help you run the thing. So it just, it is what it is.
What, you have a report here, and I kind of looked at it. I haven't looked at it in detail, and it's called the Automated Demand Management Report. Can you talk about that a little bit? And we'll bring it up on the screen and sort of tell the audience what they're looking at, and where the performance is.
Yeah. So an interesting thing that happens in sort of these large format buildings in major metropolitan areas is that the utility has to provide power delivery, like instantaneous power delivery that meets the needs of these buildings in real time. And so they charge you. So if you set like a peak in your month, they're going to look at that peak, and then they're going to say, based on that peak, we're going to charge you 40% of your bill is going to be the total amount of power capacity we have to have on the grid at any given time.
Yeah.
So one of the very earliest use cases of our sensor technology was like, let's come in and let's manage when that peak is going to happen. So we built this algorithm that forecasts where those peaks are. And every time we saw that a peak was about to happen, we would take an action. Like we come in, tell the building management system or the HVAC system or the engineer, we say, hey, come down and change this or change these set points. And we did that. And every time we did that, we tracked, here's how much we did as a performance delta from what the forecast said. And so we generate these reports for our customers where these total number of events that happen, we will track exactly when they happen. We will make the actuation change that has to happen in their control system. And then we show them how much money it saved them. And we add it all up. So at the end of the month, we send them this report. It tells them, here's how many times this event triggered. Here's the total run time that our AI took over the building. So, like we only took over the building for like a day in this report, a day and a half roughly. And we saved you like $600.
Oh, wow. So this is just okay. So what happens though when these activities happen, and like you mentioned the HVAC? I mean, the person still has to do the carpet cleaning. So what is the action? What is the real world action that needs to be then taken? And what is there an example in this situation what they adjusted to actually save the money?
Yeah. So in this situation, this was actually this report's actually a pretty old report, but it's from the early days of us implementing in one of the largest hotels in San Francisco. And one of the things that we did in that very first demonstration was like, we want to talk to your building management system, the HVAC system, and we're going to just adjust things. So in this specific example, every time we saw a forecast happening, like something happening, we took action on their cooling towers. So the fan speed, we dial it down. We'd change the airflow rates. We would do things to like make sure that it doesn't hit that peak, or we'd maybe talk to one of the elevator banks and say, hey, like take off one of these elevator banks and do this airflow change. And then that event, we just captured it. And then eventually, like this is just an early report, but eventually we started integrating into their chiller plant, which is a much bigger body of like thermal storage, and we can pre-cool the water. So you can think like if you need 55-degree water going into that that cooling system, well, you don't have to do it when it's going to set a new peak. Do it early, and that water is going to hold that temperature and maybe coast up 1 or 2 degrees. But if you do it early, you can just store all that energy in the water, run it through, coast through those peaks. Like there's lots of examples like that we've done where we've done this, and the performance improvement for these buildings is like, like 20-30% baseline energy savings. And when that's amplified across these huge demand charges, you're saving massive amounts of money on your utility bill.
Huge. But in these systems though, how are you controlling them? Does someone have to manually then, or I don't know how these systems work in these buildings. How do they actually control the systems that are using too much power? Is there manual control?
In the early days, it was like a lot of manual control. I mean, today, like when we look at a building today, we have a solution called adaptive automation, and we integrate with any open BACnet Modbus IP enabled system. So we'll go in, we have a gateway that ties into these systems. We analyze all the sensor points that we want to control. We provide a control scheme. We run a simulation, and then we have, the customer basically turn the control scheme over to us. We'll integrate, and we do everything automatic. So it's kind of hands-free. It's you can think of it like, I don't know if you're familiar with like the Nest thermostat, but it creates like a Nest-like effect for a large commercial building.
You might have to walk us through that a little bit, because I'm not familiar with that. So what is that? Is that, I guess another way I'd ask it is could that apply to any like a building from 50 years ago with some old electrical system all into it? Or does the building need to be at a certain level before it's applicable that you can get in there and actually operate these systems?
Yeah, so yeah, unfortunately, buildings that are like 50 years old that have like pneumatic systems don't even have electronic controls.
Yeah.
You have to go in and upgrade those control systems to make our systems talk to it. We can what we really good at, like we're good at software. That's what the company's kind of built around, building really good software. And we happen to have this really nice sophisticated sensor that enables our software. But we don't do like a lot of the control stuff. So if we are providing this data to an older building, generally what we do is like we have an analytics dashboard, we have some basic alarming tools, and we can send it to the original, the workflow of like an operator. If operator wants to dial something down, tune it down. And if that person gets tired of doing that, then we can recommend different ways to upgrade their facility to the level where we can talk to it. It just has to have some very basic control capability that's connected, and then we can talk to it.
And these new systems, it's all AI operated essentially.
And any building built like, last 15, 20 years, they have these kind of these systems in there. We just go in and we can just integrate directly with those buildings.
So do you have a flag? I see this EV2. Is that sort of like your flagship? Is that EV2? Is that part of every system? Is that like the hub? Could you walk us through that?
That is, yeah. So EV2 is it stands for Einstein version 2. It's like I think our 6th generation system. It's basically a gateway with a toolless digital sensor that can clip in. And there's a couple of innovations that we've made to the system over the years. Like one of the things that we've done is like we got rid of unnecessary costs. We ripped out the display, we ripped out panel buttons, we ripped out anything that would just like specialty power chips anything that would just cost a lot of money. And we put a high performance computing platform on here. We made it toolless, we made it digital, and every sensor kind of daisy chains to the next sensor. So when you put this thing into a panel, it's fastest I've ever seen it done is maybe like 15, 20 minutes. But,
wow.
Typically takes about an hour. You put it in the panel, clip everything together, runs through an analysis. You pair it with you can pair it with a mobile device, or we can run a connected algorithm that lets you commission everything. And then, it's kind of off and running. So it has its own built-in wireless connectivity, but you can also connect it to like a network, a hardwired network if you want.
This show is not for the humble. We're trying to get people on here to promote what they're doing and explain it and talk. And you've had quite some success in even getting awards. You've had some. I think we need to highlight those just to show how successful the company has been with your innovation.
Well, yeah, thanks. I mean, it's been a long time of hardware, building out really good tech, and testing it with these customers. But, finally, I think a lot of these customers, the bigger ones that we work with today, they really see the power of like kind of cloud connected, high frequency energy data. And they're kind of ramping up. So yeah, we talked, I don't know if I can mention by name, but like the largest North American online retailer, is using our system to kind of power all their fulfillment centers, their transport hubs. They need to collect this data. They have mandates around their carbon footprint. They have goals that they want to achieve around the efficiency of these buildings, and they have goals they want to achieve around the reliability of equipment in these buildings. So they're out there kind of rapidly trying to deploy this. Same with major North American telecom company. Two of the largest ones actually are working with our systems. Again, I think there's this focus on high reliability of their electrical infrastructure because they want high quality networks. They're upgrading their systems all to like 5G, trying to slap in a lot more equipment in the same building footprint.
Yeah.
And so they're just managing that data and optimizing it and tuning it efficiently. All of those things are like really critical, and especially doing it at scale. Like if you can imagine the size of these operations, they're massive. So I think we spent a lot of time building a really stable, enterprise grade, secure system that can be massively deployed at scale. And I think that's kind of what led to this award, this recent award we got from Deutsche Telekom, which is called the Network Sustainability Award. And we also got like a Golden Bridge Business Innovation Award. My co-founder Thomas, who's also my brother, also just recently got recognized for this 40 under 40 Silicon Valley Business Journal award. So,
I mean, congratulations, because the thing with is it's very difficult to get a company off the ground. That's the first thing, and it's very difficult to get new innovation into the industry, into any industry. When you were sort of putting all this together, was it a pretty clear vision of what the company, you wanted the company to be? Did you have an idea that you were going to get to work with these major telecommunications and online retailers, and was that the goal?
No, it was not the goal. It's funny. I think the vision has evolved and shifted over time, but the goal in the beginning was just to like try and make a contribution, try and help someone who had a problem with energy, like someone like myself. If I'm wasting electricity, how can I help someone do a better part? They want to do something better. How can I help them do better? And it just turns out that over time, as I talk to more people, more and more of these customers, and people kind of just repeated the same problem. They're like, "Can you help me? Can you help me?" And eventually, it was like we talked to some of these massive people, and they're like, "Well, can you help me?"
Yeah,
and like, sure. That's what we want to do. We want to be helpful. So it's what led to this.
Yeah, it's and I've talked to people, and this is something I didn't even know a few years ago. We've had companies that are multi-billion-dollar companies on the show, but we're just filling a small demand that they have, because they need to kind of be able to tell their story in long form, and we're a platform that can do it. And these big companies, they will work with anybody who can offer them value. It's
That's
just
right.
and that's all it comes down to. It's not about your marketing strategy. I mean, those all things are good. And how you brand yourself, and certainly not about how you dress. It's like, can you fill a value? That is what they care about. At the end of the day, that's what they're going to look at. But I am curious with companies of that size. In our show, they're just coming in and they're doing an interview. It's a very simple process. With you, you're really integrating into their actual facility and their assets.
Mm-hmm.
And as your company that's also growing and developing, I think you said this is the EV2 is your second or sixth generation, you said?
Yeah, sixth generation.
So what about that? They call and say, "Are you interested?" But you're right in the middle of development. I'm sure it's happened to you before. How do you deal with that when it's like, in 2 months we're going to have the better version, but they're ready to go right now? How do you sort of approach that type of thing?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, we're not like a consumer device, so that each generation is like complete obsolete the prior generation. Okay. I mean, what we've been doing, I think, and we are making improvements to our system over time. I think mostly what we're trying to do here is just get the cost out of the system. Like the baseline functionality of what we're trying to do is all software. So you can think of it like we put some really nice hardware together, really powerful computing, all these things, but like the level of data that we need, and the firmware that we need, all that can be over the air upgraded. Even like our prior generation EV1 actually is a great system. We still have tons of these systems out in the field that are working. It just cost a lot more to make. And it was, what we've been trying to do is just try and reduce the cost, reduce the barrier. We don't want to just be serving the largest companies that can afford to do a better job. We want to actually grow this thing. The vision is like, let's just make it so brain dead easy and simple that everyone could be saving electricity and running efficiently. Like they don't have to have they don't have to live in a first world country or be the largest company in the world to be able to afford good energy management.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, and I know this isn't probably where your focus is now, but even like these huge like mining operations and oil fields and stuff, I mean, there must just be huge opportunity in that space for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are definitely what we consider like critical operation and running, they're running 24/7.
Yeah.
They have equipment that needs to be like constantly monitored and tracked and measured. And, I know a lot of these guys are from, the older energy industry where they have to be under pressure to be doing as best as they can. So, yeah, I mean, what we're working on right now is like, let's get this thing more ruggedized. Let's get it lower cost. But people can deploy these systems at scale now, and we can be working with them as we go.
Was there, but once you got started, it's sort of an interesting approach you took was starting essentially in your home. By the time you were starting the business with you and your partners, you had a very clear understanding with your background and everything like that this would work. It was just a matter of making it into a business model, essentially. Or was that development stage also very challenging?
Well, yes and no. I guess that's maybe not a real answer to the question. I mean, we knew the technology would work. We prototyped it. We knew like there was no real technical barriers to enabling the kind of algorithms that we want. The big challenges and the surprising challenges for us was just like how complicated and regulated this industry was. So there, certain things that surprised us was like, we're going to go into these, 480 volt panels. Well, if you do that, you got to go get Underwriters Laboratory listed and under these safety certifications. And if you want the data to be like used for utility grade building, you have to go through another certification process, and you have to go through. So there was a lot of things that we learned about the hardware that we didn't expect going in, that made things more complicated, take a little bit longer. Also like our backgrounds are semiconductor type hardware. So we're talking about like super like stable, clean hardware development platforms. Right. And then we put our systems in, there's this one like completely outdoor, large grape operation, actually the largest North American winemaking operation. Oh. We put these things out in the desert and like dust, like, what? Right. Dust gets in the creeps in there, like, shuts down the system overheats. I'm like, what happened? Right. So like sort of surprising things that we just really, we had to learn the hard way a little bit, but went through and kind of fixed and cleaned up. So nothing that wasn't solvable or fundamentally unsolvable. It just hadn't been done in our industry yet. Right. That must be another, agriculture must be another huge one, because the energy waste in that sector is just, it's unbelievable. Like, I mean, even I just remember, even as a kid, when we had ranches and stuff around us, and they used to have these sprinklers on the top. And they would these pivot lines, and they'd go around in a circle, and they'd just the old, the big sprinkler, and it'd shoot out water. So that water is flying in the air for like 100 feet, let's say, through in the hottest time of the day. Oh, yeah. Then, of course, people realize, well, if we put the hose down and it just sprinkles, it'll go into the ground fast. And it's just, and I guess, and I wondered too, I don't know if you've seen this yet. I'm sure you will, but I think the thing with something like what you're doing with that AI and this tracking is that it will spur on other motivation, because people will start to see the culprits. Yeah. Then they start to go, if we can change this, well, what technology is out there that we can switch this out? Have you seen anything like that already? Yeah. I mean, I think, one of the interesting things that this one goes back to that large North American retailer that I mentioned, is like they were one of the first ones to kind of move to like a fully automated fulfillment center model, like very light on workers, heavy in the robotics. They had these gigantic systems that were robotic systems that come in, like move and distribute large panels and reconfigure. And because they're all constantly moving around in these centers, they'd go and get recharged at a charging, like the docking station for the charger. And they had modeled out what they thought it would cost to kind of charge. They said when these robotic systems are off the charging platform, they're not bleeding any electricity. And and we put our systems on there, and right away we immediately discovered like those things are just constantly burning. Like there's no, because it's like an inductive charging system.
Yeah.
They thought it was like not doing anything when the system was off, but actually it was just constantly powering, like pumping power out.
The charging station itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it added up to like millions and millions of dollars across all their sites. So they were just like, they went back and they just fixed that. They did a like very mechanical detection of like, okay, when this happens, we turn it off. When it goes back on, we turn it on. Like, don't leave it on because it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So, I think having the data and having it connected, there's all sorts of new innovations coming up all the time. Like the implementation of our system as a cloud connected device. I'll give another example, which is like in the telecom company that we one of the telecom companies.
It must kill you to not be able to say the names on the show.
I know. I wish I could. I need to get special permission.
Yeah.
But they, they've been kind of really doing something interesting, which is like, in the classic data center, you can think of it like they have this metric called PUE, and what that means is like I don't actually know what it stands for, power utilization efficiency or something. They try to measure how much electricity is going to cooling the data center and powering the data center. And the classic model here was run the temperature higher until the servers fail. And that lowers the amount of HVAC that you're kind of putting into this system. So these rooms get really hot, and that lowers your PUE supposedly. But one of the things that they weren't modeling, and one of the things that our system enables is kind of like in real time, as you're tracking this electricity in real time, can we be simultaneously measuring the throughput of these servers? Can we be measuring like what's our actual communication speed? Because that's the actual metric we care about. Like and as these and we're looking for like what is the real PUE, because as these heat going up, all the little fans inside these servers are starting to spin like crazy.
Right.
And the clock speed is being downgraded, and the throughput through this thing is actually worse. So they were targeting kind of found themselves kind of targeting the wrong metric. And they've been trying to using our system. They now have a capability to kind of go after a completely different metric that is really targeting how much bandwidth, how much throughput, how much utilization they can get through their network for the same power envelope, which is the actual right way to do it. And the only way to do that is kind of like have this kind of reliable 5.9 data that we can provide them.
It's actually, again, it's incredible what you're doing. It almost seems even more incredible that with all the advancement that this got missed. It just doesn't seem, but yeah, there's all these other expenses, and it does happen. I guess last question I'd have for you, because you do have partners, and that is, is there a moment, we've certainly had them in our company. Was there a moment where the company had called, the got green lighted a project, or you had a breakthrough in how the technology would operate, or, the first prototype showed up? Or is there a moment that sort of stands out for you and you thought, this is like, we have the company that we're on our way? It's sort of a celebratory moment.
That's, this is going to be recency biased. I mean, I'm sure there's something historically that I kind of felt that way. Maybe like thinking about like the when we got awarded that patent, the first patent that we got was like, oh wow, like no one had ever even patented this before. So then that was kind of a moment. But if I had to think of like one moment, and it's probably pretty recent, it's really last year when these customers that we had been talking to and been working with, and they've been testing us, and like you mentioned, like they need to solve a pain point, but a lot of these big businesses move pretty slowly about vetting things, and they want to make sure that you're not going to just disappear. They want to make sure that if they're going to put something as critical as this down, it's going to be with a company that that's going to survive and work. And it was really like last year that a handful of these companies that I mentioned just said, we're all in on Verdigris. And, you know, EV2 has been our most successful like system by far, like dwarfed every other generation we've ever sold. So we have, you know, thousands of these systems. I think that's when I felt like, okay, we have a system people really value, and it works. And I think that's the moment that I feel like, you know, sort of last year, really, the moment that I felt like this is the business that's going to take over.
It's, you know, I do hope, you know, this is, our show is more about the technology and that. I hope there's, you know, I hope you're going to be joining some entrepreneur shows and that for people that are trying to get into business and look. 'Cause I think what you've done, you've, you know, it started off with a personal problem. You had all the pieces that supporting, you know, that education and work experience, and then a personal motivation, and just that, and then developing new generations, to, you know, bringing it to new customers, changing even your focus on industry, all those types of things. I mean, it's a huge entrepreneurial story of how you do this. So I know the rest of your team's not here. Hopefully they'll see it, but congratulations to you and your team. I think it's just fantastic what your company's done.
Thank you, Jared. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, everybody. Thank you for watching. Yeah. Amazing. It's really amazing what they've done, Gowdy. We're going to have their website and LinkedIn and follow them and connect with them. I think this is only the start of the story. Gowdy, where can people follow our amazing innovation of a show? Well, I'm getting an award. Can you start nominating me for something? I need something. I need a little plaque back there.
Yeah. Next show, I will gift one of those, like, thank you for participating.
Oh, my parents would be so disappointed.
Okay, well, definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got a ton of new episodes coming our way or your way. So you don't want to miss that. Follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, everywhere. If you'd like to be part of the show or would like to recommend someone else to be part of the show, contact us, info@crownsmen.com. Yeah.
And keep suggesting guests. That is a huge, I mean, you'll see, I'd say probably half of our guests now are someone else has brought them in. And it's just because we just can't on our radar. It's just, what do you end up with? What we end up with this show is we get one guest on and then they introduce us to somebody else. So it ends up in a you get the similar shows going. So when someone else brings in other people, it opens up a whole new world, new audiences. It's fantastic. Thanks again, Mark Chung, for joining the show. Check out Verdigris, and we will see you on the next episode of Crownsmen Energy.